The One Who Repented, the story of Dismas. My name is Dismas. I will tell you about my worst and my best day. It began on the first hour on Wednesday. We were 3 men from different situations condemned to be crucified. Gestas I had known of because he was like me, but not like me. He was so mercenary, vindictive. What crimes I committed, I did to rid our land of the Roman oppressors. That's how it started out, but soon, so consumed by hate, I became just like him. But the third man, this Jesus of Nazareth, I didn't understand how he could have done anything worthy of this sentence. I wondered about this strong, quiet man, but not for very long, since I was facing my own torturous death. By the time we saw him, he had already been worked over by the Sanhedrin and their guards, his face bloody, full of bruises, his beard ripped out. The Romans pounced on him as a lion does to a wounded animal, and by far he got the worst of the scourgings. It was almost as if they wanted to provoke him to respond, as they had seen other men do. His back looked like shredded meat. By the time they got through with him, this Jesus had lost so much blood he could barely stand. I was sure that I would suffer the same fate. When they turned to us, the Roman soldiers seemed to have used up most of their hatred on him. No scourging is a good scourging, but they weren't as merciless to us as they were to him. On the second hour, we were then led on the long, slow procession to Golgotha, the place of the skull. Each of us had a Roman guard who led the way before us, announcing our crimes. The first Roman guard shouted out, "Gestas, guilty of revolt and ruthless highway robbery." The second bellowed, "Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews." Then the one assigned to me yelled, "Dismas, guilty of ruthless insurrection and treason." This was meant to be a public event. The Roman soldiers chose to take us the longest way possible to Golgotha, ensuring that everyone saw just how the Roman Empire treated their enemies. A large gathering followed this Jesus, including many women who tearfully protested his innocence. I remember him telling them not to weep for him. I didn't understand. He was almost half dead and yet could think of others. He had fallen under the weight of the crossbar a number of times, so the Romans drafted this Cyrenian to carry his cross the rest of the way. By the third hour, we were thrown down and nailed to our crosses, with Gestas on his left and I on his right. Even his response was different. Of course, he cried out in agonizing pain, while Gestas cursed the Romans. "You butchers don't enjoy this so much." I cursed as well, the day I was born, what I had seen them do, that I had been born to live such a life, but not a word from this Jesus. I was not unaware of how I would die, but I was not prepared for how bad it would be. Clank, clank, clank! The iron spikes pierced between the 2 bones in our forearms. Our hands immediately contracted into claws. Excruciating bolts of fiery pain shot through our arms. This was repeated just as forcefully when they nailed our feet. Our crosses were dropped like a thud into the holes in the ground, jarring our every joint. The weight of our bodies pulled down on our outstretched arms and shoulders, heavy pressure on our lungs. Meanwhile, the Romans divided his garments, especially his seamless tunic, for which they gambled. Hadn't they done enough? We could breathe in, but not out. Soon our muscles began cramping. To get enough breath to talk, we had to pull our bloodied backs, re-wounding them up over the rough wood, increasing the pain in our nailed arms. Most of the time, we didn't make the effort, but what we did say, we said in short gasps. The first thing he said was, "Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing." Who says that kind of thing? After all they've done to him, he's forgiving them? A Roman soldier then offered us vinegar and poison to prolong the torture and humiliation as much as possible, though it did dull some of the pain. Gestas and I drank it, but he refused. Gestas lashed out at him. "What's wrong with you? Refusing that, you fool!" There had been many, many women following him on the way, but maybe it got to be too much for them, so they had gone home. Now, just a few remained, around 4 Galilean women, still watching from a distance, and a young man, so painful for them to watch, but unable to leave him. I noticed because I had no one there. Anyone who knew me was too ashamed to witness my execution. During the 4th hour, the insults started. 2 Jewish men snarled, "So, you who are going to destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, try to do that now. Come down from the cross and save yourself. Ha!" A Pharisee stated, "He saved others, but he can't save himself. Some Messiah." A scribe jeered, "Let this Messiah, the King of Israel, come down from the cross now, that we may see and believe." The chief priest proclaimed, "Let God rescue him now, if he wants him, for he said, 'I am the Son of God.'" And they laughed. The Roman soldiers sneered, "If you are the King of the Jews, save yourself. King of the dogs is more like it." Gestas retorted, "Aren't you the Christ? Why don't you save yourself and us? If you could free us from these crosses, why don't you?" I even joined in. "Why don't you do something if you've got the power, if you're really..." But he turned to look at me with such eyes of love and compassion that I had to stop. On the 5th hour, Gestas kept on, spitting out his one-word invectives as if his hatred took his mind off his own suffering. But this wasn't right. Gestas and I were reacting as expected of anyone in agonizing pain, with flies picking at our wounds, too much time to think. But this man was someone so different, patient in suffering, not responding to anything said to him, loving those who hated him, even as they reviled him. This man might just be who he said he was. I couldn't take any more of Gestas blaming this Jesus. I rebuked him. "Don't you fear God even now, as you are condemned? We deserve this for our deeds, but this man has done nothing wrong. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." He looked at me with those eyes so full of love and now so full of agony and said, "Truly I say to you today, you will be with me in paradise. I didn't know what he meant, but I believed him. All of a sudden, at the 6th hour, a darkness you could feel came over the land. I was so afraid. But then, if he were God's son, wouldn't there be some sign like this? Wouldn't God close his eyes so he wouldn't have to look at his son suffering? This was followed by a fierce storm. Rain and lightning, thunder overwhelmed this hill. Now the young man and the women came nearer to his cross. The women were supporting the one who was sobbing the most. Must have been his mother. But when he began to speak, she composed herself enough to hear what he had to say. Woman, this is your son. And looking at the man, this is your mother. Once again, this Jesus, unbelievable, making sure she had someone to take care of her. A torrent of tears, the woman collapsed into the young man's arms. Around halfway through the 7th hour, the darkness seemed unending. We were so cold, struggling to breathe out. Such pain when we tried, our heads foggy, hard to think. And then something strange happened. This good man, perhaps the Son of God, seemed to feel something that only he could feel. My God, why have you forsaken me? That seemed even harder for him than all the pain and the abuse. Those watching didn't understand, thought he was calling for Elijah. The scoffers couldn't resist. Let him alone. Let's see if Elijah will come to save him. I didn't know why this was important at the time. Before, he had refused the sour wine and poison. Now he said, I thirst. Someone offered him a sponge filled with sour wine. Why did I remember this verse? And for my thirst, they gave me vinegar to drink. Between almost the 8th hour and the 9th hour, when this Jesus had received the wine, he said, It is finished. He cried out in a loud voice, summoning all his strength, Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. And he breathed his last. At the 9th hour, the darkness lifted, but the earth shook violently, hard enough for the tombs to open, a strange sense that something was very different. Longinus the centurion noticed this, having crucified many, many men, watching them turn into cursing animals or pitiful creatures. Seeing how this Jesus died, he said, Surely this was the Son of God. Many who had come, the curiosity seekers, those goaded by the leaders, who came to watch the spectacle, when they actually saw how he died, all those were overcome with guilt and anguish. They went home, beating their breasts in sorrow. Since it was almost time for the high Sabbath on Thursday, the priests wanted our bodies to be taken down from the crosses. They asked the Romans to break our legs so that we would die sooner. One soldier approached Gestas first. With a heavy iron bar, he broke his legs. Gestas cursed for a few more minutes, gasped, and passed away. Another noticed that this Jesus was already dead, so he thrust a spear in his side and was satisfied when blood and water flowed out. Then it was my turn. Whack goes the iron bar. My head, my body slumped. Soon I can't breathe. I can't breathe. Finally, my last gasp. But it wasn't over. I open my eyes and find myself in a meadow, beautiful beyond description. As I walk along, I see the grass is a greener green, the sky a bluer blue, unimaginable colors of the intensely sweet-smelling flowers, the happy chirping of the birds, music everywhere, such beauty. It was like I was being carried along by love. On my right, a beautiful clear river with singing fish. I look down and see myself, but completely whole, better than before. I still had the wounds of my crucifixion, but in the center of each of them, a little golden star. I pinched myself because somehow I thought I was dreaming. I came to a city with amazing buildings, wonderful homes, perfect streets, places for people to gather to enjoy the delights that God created. I met welcoming people who looked so glorious and regal. They gathered around me and hugged me as if I were a long-lost brother. I got up the courage to speak to someone. "Where am I?" I asked. A young woman responded, "This is the paradise that Jesus told you about. This beauty and peace are more real than anything you knew on earth. We're all so excited. We know that one day, maybe sooner now, the Lord Jesus Christ will come to take us home. We're so happy to have you with us. You must meet the father of our faith, Abraham. He will explain everything to you." Then they offered to take me to see him. But wait. So now you see, my worst day became my best day. Because in my death, I hung next to this Jesus. This monologue was the result of much research and cross-referencing of the Gospels. I am very indebted to the insights of Rick Joyner, Kat Kerr, and Lee Strobel.